This video was made possible by our generous supporters on Patreon. Check out patreon.com/NWR for all the details.
A few months ago, I was given the opportunity to go fully hands-on with the Chromatic, a newly designed Game Boy device created by ModRetro. My extensive preview delved into what the device was promising, as well as the way in which it wanted to set itself apart from the flood of new emulated Game Boy handhelds you can purchase online. ModRetro is making a big play here, with the ambition to publish multiple classic and new Game Boy games as well. The Chromatic is their flagship product, so how does one deliver a new Game Boy in 2024? Well, I am happy to report that the Chromatic is one of the most pleasing retro devices I've played in a very long time. For returning or new players, this is a device that embraces the original design philosophy of the Game Boy, but polishes its modern tweaks to perfection. The Chromatic will allow anyone to rediscover the amazing library of those systems in the highest quality you can find. Now, let's talk about that design first. The Chromatic is available in several colors, each resembling color palettes from the Game Boy Color era. The device combines several design aspects from the original Game Boy and the Game Boy Color. The overall shape is more reminiscent of the Color, but the power button is located at the top of the device, while the link cable port is on the left-hand side. It makes for an ergonomic design, complemented by its luxurious finish with a magnesium alloy shell. It adds a bit of weight to the overall device and is cool to touch, which I particularly like, without getting hot or slippery during long play sessions. The speaker is located on the bottom alongside an LED indicator for the power level and a USB-C port. The one new button you will find on the side is a menu button that enables you to change settings such as the brightness of the screen, view controls, and change visual features for certain titles. Finally, there is a sapphire screen lens on top of the pixel-accurate 160 by 144 screen, making it resistant to surface scratches. When you are holding the device, it immediately feels like a premium gadget. I was skeptical at first about the slightly smaller A and B buttons and a D-pad without its ridges and a pivot center, but honestly, it feels great to play and control games with it. The travel when pushing at buttons is just right and gives that little bit of forced feedback you are used to with more analog gadgets. As the Chromatic is designed to reviving the Game Boy experience, you will find no additional buttons on the device to play other types of games. There is no compatibility with Game Boy Advance or any other systems. This does not mean that the Chromatic does not use emulation, however. There is an FPGA core at the heart of the system that can be updated and adjusted over time via firmware updates. This might be a turnoff for some, especially in comparison to a device like the Analog Pocket, another premium gadget aimed at making it possible to replay original cartridges in an accurate form with emulation as well. The Analog Pocket is a great device, but in my experience, it always felt a little bit like it wanted to please everyone. The approach of selling expensive adapters to play a wide range of systems and the additional buttons on the device make it a bit cramped for my taste. I think the trade-off with the Chromatic being just focused on playing Game Boy and Game Boy Color games might be a difficult choice for some. But for me, the premium finishes and the design being chosen for a singular purpose makes the Chromatic stand out from the Analog Pocket. The Chromatic feels more durable with extended use. The choice to pick AA batteries as its primary power source, though a lithium rechargeable battery will be released at a later time, makes it safe to say that in 20 years the Chromatic will be just as functional as it is today. But for the average consumer, the fear of losing power or progress through dying batteries is a valid concern. A power bank and a USB-C cable do help you bridge that gap if you need it. And then there is that screen. I've gushed about it in my preview plenty, but the color grading, viewing angles and accuracy to the original Game Boy Color is unlike anything you've seen before. I wish I could accurately compare these two devices in this video, but this is incredibly challenging without holding the device in your hand. The Analog Pocket is an admirable screen, but with its larger dimension and warmer palette, it does not hold a candle to the vivid and accurate representation of the original colors on the Chromatic. Even if you're into modding retro handhelds like myself, there is no aftermarket screen that comes close to capturing what Game Boy Color actually looked like. Comparing these devices side by side, I found the Chromatic to be the most authentic in its screen colors. The Analog Pocket comes close, but its tint is a bit more oversaturated, even when adjusting the settings. The Chromatic in particular shines when it comes to the viewing angles, especially in a game like Kirby's Tilt and Tumble. Through the firmware, several palettes are available if you do want to go for a specific look with original Game Boy titles, such as the shade of green on the original Game Boy or other color palettes. They aren't for me personally, but the option is there for those who like to experiment with different looks for their games. The brightness of the screen is another matter entirely. At maximum settings you can pretty much use it as a flashlight, but the lowest brightness is absolutely perfect for short gaming sessions in a darkened room or in bed before going to sleep. I did find that the current firmware is still a bit lacking for certain quality of life features. Accessing the color palettes is hidden via a shortcut at boot of a game, and there's no indication in the menu which palette is selected. Certain options aren't explained very well, such as the frame blending and or color correction, which is only active when connecting the Chromatic via USB-C to a PC for capturing gameplay. When it comes to that brightness, the system doesn't remember which brightness you used last, so you may end up blinding yourself with the screen in a darkened room. And finally, there is no way to create save states or allow the system to go into a sleep mode. Turning the power off means closing your game and saving it beforehand. Now, this was true of the original Game Boy as well, but for certain games this means bringing out the password booklet, getting to in-game save points, and yes, keeping track of your original Pokemon battery again to make sure it won't die on you over time. Firmware can be updated, and it seems that ModRetro does want to actively support an updated device over time, but it does require the end user to shift their expectations back to the early 90s when it comes to these features. Each Chromatic being sold at launch will come with a new version of Tetris. It proves once again that Tetris is still best suited for a smaller handheld device, and this version adds some welcome changes. T-spinning, back holding, seeing what piece comes next, ghost piece, soft drop and lockdown are all here and probably make for the best version of Tetris available on Game Boy. I take this version over any other on Game Boy if it were up to me, but don't expect any fun side modes like Tetris 2 or Bomb Bliss. Additional ModRetro published titles are also compatible with Game Boy Color. I was sent Tales from Monsterland DX, Patchy Matchy, and Tokitori Ultimate Edition. Tales of Monsterland DX is a cute, albeit a bit unpolished action platformer with a banger of a soundtrack. Tokitori Ultimate Edition is probably the best version of the original Tokitori. Small design tweaks like making jumping over ledges happen automatically, as well as a drastic increase in speed and removal of the timer, make it a joy to play through its many challenging puzzles. But my personal favorite was Patchy Matchy. This is a game that I just love to pluck away at. It's a simple tile matching puzzle game where connecting a row of 4 makes the row disappear, but it just feels great to pick up and play. The real goal isn't to get the highest number of points, but to complete a set of over 20 achievements. This one got the most replayability for me and is even compatible with an original Game Boy. And then there is of course the massive Game Boy and Game Boy Color library. Every title is compatible with the Chromatic, including some wild ones like Pokemon Pinball, Kirby's Tilt and Tumble, and yes, the Game Boy camera. I went out of my way to pick up the Game Boy camera as the USB-C port makes it possible to directly capture gameplay from the Chromatic. So yes, I can now use the Game Boy camera as a live streaming webcam or as a way to get my photos easily transferred to my computer. Yo, what up y'all? I just found out this great new game called Fortnite, so we're gonna dive right in. I'm on this bus and we're just floating around. Time to jump off that bus and see how many kills we can get to that victory royale. Look at my quality. You can't call your camera potato quality if I'm using an actual potato. While I think it will not be the preferred method of choice for the die-hard macro photographers, it does make for a very comfortable shooting experience. As of writing, audio pass-through isn't available yet via OBS and the Chromatic, but it is a feature that is planned as an update at a later time. For now, you'll need to connect a line into your computer to fully capture the audio. It is a great way to play Game Boy games directly while also using the footage for videos or live streams. Just keep in mind that it will use the original resolution of 160 by 144, so it might look a bit pixelated on most HD screens. I just want everyone to know that I genuinely consider to do the entire review via a Game Boy camera. You should be happy, we're not doing that. The real question that hangs over this review is not the quality of the device, nor the compatibility with certain games, but rather, who is the Chromatic for? It is a valid question, as there are nowadays plenty of ways to play Game Boy titles on a plethora of devices. From modern Android-based emulation devices produced by companies like Ambernic, to the aforementioned premium Analog Pocket, and then also those who have dedicated themselves to building and improving original Game Boy devices through modding. There's pros and cons to each of these methods or devices. I feel that the Chromatic defines itself not through addition, but subtraction and refinement. In every aspect of the design, interaction and compatibility, it all comes back to the singular design inspiration, that original Game Boy experience. Where one would sit down with a single game for a long time or in short bursts. The overwhelming amount of options and choice that an Ambernic device or even the Analog Pocket offer is welcome for those who just want a one-and-all device. But I've always found that this hasn't been able to grab my attention for prolonged periods. Games played on these systems become short distractions before something else comes along and it disappears in a drawer again. There's a point to be made that the Chromatic understands the appeal of the original games and that much of it rests on the device itself as well. The simplified controls, limited color palettes and capability to just run 2 types of games didn't feel like a cheap compromise, but allowed the games themselves to take center stage. In my extended time with the Chromatic, I found that the device itself almost became invisible to the experience, because I just started focusing on the game and not the bells and whistles surrounding it. It is hard to describe, but it just clicks. It understands where luxurious finishes were needed, like the screen and the shell, but also where the classic feel could be maximized by returning to a minimalistic approach. The buttons feel like magic, mashing and clicking away, never needing to worry about hitting the wrong button. Everything about the Chromatic is tactile and polished, and I simply did not want to put it down. Is that worth the premium price for most consumers? I'm not entirely sure, but for those who do not wish to mod their original hardware, but are looking for a method to play their original games in the most accurate way possible, the Chromatic is the best answer to experiencing the Game Boy library in the way it was originally designed. ModRetro is aiming to use the Chromatic as a jumping off point to reintroduce the general public to the magic of the Game Boy. A library of new titles is being released over the coming months, and due to partnerships with stores like GameStop, it might break through with a wider audience.
The Chromatic hits, and it hits hard. You know, constraint is really difficult in an age where more features, additions, and software updates are always expected. And the Chromatic makes it clear that this is what the Game Boy always was, and it resets those expectations. Each time I go back to boot up another game, you get this little jolt of excitement when picking up the Chromatic. I feel its weight, I admire its screen, and I know that this is some of the best that all of my favorite games have ever looked. That to me is worth that premium price. And for those who want to experience Game Boy again, or pass those memories on to a new generation that did not grow up with these titles, I am pretty sure that the Chromatic is the closest thing to perfection as you can get. And honestly, I just want to keep playing this thing. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time.
This video was made possible by our generous supporters on Patreon. Did you know that Nintendo World Report is funded directly by fans like you? When you support Nintendo World Report on Patreon, you get immediate access to multiple exclusive podcasts every month, exclusive Discord channels, an early look at select content, and more, all for as little as $1 a month. Check out patreon.com/NWR for all the details.